My neighbor tried to sell hunting rights to land he didn't own, and if the game warden hadn't shown up when he did, I might have handled it in a way that would have ended a whole lot worse. I didn't find out because he told me. I found out because I drove home one Friday afternoon and saw two trucks parked behind my gate like they'd been invited. That's when I knew something wasn't right. I own 76 wooded acres out near the county line in southern Missouri, nothing fancy, just rolling hardwoods and a shallow limestone creek that bends through the center like it's got nowhere better to be. My granddad bought that land after he came back from Korea, paid cash for it in 1962, and my dad kept it clean, marked, and respected. When it passed to me, it came with more than a deed. It came with a way of doing things. The boundaries are old, but they're precise. Iron pins set in concrete at every corner. Survey recorded at the courthouse. Every spring I walk the line myself with a bucket of purple paint and a brush, fresh marks on the trees so nobody can claim confusion. Around here purple means no trespassing. That's not folklore. That's statute. I don't lease hunting rights. Never have. If somebody hunts my place, it's because I shook their hand and told them they were welcome. Sometimes that's my cousin and his boy. Sometimes it's my buddy Ray from church. But I don't sell weekends to strangers like it's a motel. Now my neighbor to the east, a guy named Travis McCall, runs a little guiding outfit during deer season. Nothing huge. A website, a few trail cameras, some out-of-state clients who want a Midwest buck to hang over their fireplace in Phoenix or somewhere. He bought his 40 acres about 5 years back. We were cordial. Not friends exactly, but neighborly enough. Wave across the fence. Talk about rain. That sort of thing. Still, I always had the sense he thought my land was wasted on me. He'd make comments now and then. You ever think about leasing some of that out, man? There's money in those woods. You're sitting on opportunity. I'd shrug and tell him I was sitting on peace, which was worth more. So when I turned down my gravel drive last November and saw those two pickups inside my gate, I figured it was either a mistake or a whole lot of nerve. The gate wasn't locked. I don't lock it during daylight. Never had to. The paint marks are clear. The signs are clear. Or at least I thought they were. I parked slow and stepped out. I could hear voices down by the creek. Then I noticed something that made my stomach go tight. There were laminated tags nailed to my fence posts near the entrance. Authorized access Ridgeline Outdoor Adventures. That wasn't my sign. Ridgeline was Travis's business. I just stood there for a second, staring at that logo like maybe I'd misread it. But no, it was his mountain silhouette graphic and everything. I walked down toward the voices, boots crunching over leaves, and I saw two men in blaze orange moving through my timber like they'd studied it. One of them had a printed map folded in his back pocket. I called out, easy but firm. Afternoon, fellas. They turned around polite enough. One was mid-40s, the other maybe early 30s. They didn't look like trouble. They looked like customers. Can we help you, sir? The older one asked. Yeah, I said. I think you can. You mind telling me what property you think you're on? They exchanged a glance. The younger guy reached into his vest and pulled out a folded contract in a clear sleeve like he'd done it before. We've got exclusive access this weekend through Ridgeline, he said. Signed agreement and everything. He handed it to me. There it was. Travis's signature at the bottom. A highlighted map. And that map included my creek bottom. My stand of white oaks. My north ridge. You boys pay for this? I asked. Yes, sir, the older one said. 2-day guided access, private acreage, guaranteed low pressure. I let out a slow breath. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. This land you're standing on, I said, tapping the map, isn't Travis's to lease. They looked confused. Like kids who just found out their tickets were counterfeit. We pulled up the parcel map online before booking, the younger one said. It showed expanded acreage this year. Expanded, I repeated. That's one word for it. I explained it plain. 76 acres, deed in my name. Survey filed. Purple paint marks all along the boundary. You crossed into private property that your guide doesn't own. To their credit, they didn't argue. They didn't puff up or act entitled. They just looked embarrassed. Man, we drove 9 hours for this, the older one muttered. I believe you, I said. And I'm not mad at you. But you need to pack up. They did. No drama. As they walked back toward the trucks, the younger one shook his head. He advertised more land this season. Said he'd secured additional creek frontage. Yeah, I said quietly. He did. I watched them drive off, tires spitting gravel, and I stood there alone with that laminated sign still nailed to my fence. It would have been easy to storm over to Travis's place right then. He lives about half a mile down the road in a modular home with a big metal shop behind it. I could have gone banging on his door, waving that contract in his face. But something about the neatness of it all stopped me. This wasn't confusion. This was paperwork. Advertising. Money exchanged. That night I sat at my kitchen table with my dad's old deed spread out under the light, and I thought about how land holds memory. My granddad clearing brush with a mule. My dad teaching me how to track after a light snow. Me teaching my niece how to fish that same creek last spring. It wasn't about deer. It was about someone deciding they could turn my family's ground into inventory. The next morning, instead of driving east to talk, I drove west to the county office and asked to speak to the game warden. Because around here, selling hunting rights you don't legally control isn't just neighborly bad manners. It's a wildlife violation. And I had a feeling this was about to get a whole lot bigger than a laminated sign. The county office smells like old coffee and paper that's been handled too many times. And when I walked in that Saturday morning, I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for clarity. There's a difference, even if it doesn't feel like it at first. The receptionist recognized me, small-town perks, and told me Officer Daniel Harper was in the back finishing paperwork. Harper's been the game warden in our district for almost a decade. Tall, lean, the kind of quiet that makes people tell the truth without realizing they're doing it. He's the sort of man who can write you a citation and still shake your hand after. He stepped out, saw my face, and said, "Well, you don't look like you're here to renew a fishing license." I gave him a half smile and laid the contract on his desk. "I think my neighbor's been leasing my land." He didn't laugh, didn't even raise his eyebrows. He just pulled the paper closer and started reading. "You give him written permission?" he asked. "No." He flipped the page. "You ever lease your hunting rights to anyone?" "No." He nodded once, slow. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at me over the top of the contract. "If he's charging access fees for acreage he doesn't legally control, that's unlawful commercialization. And if clients cross your boundary under his direction, that's facilitation of trespass. Each instance counts. Each instance." I thought about those two guys in orange. Polite. Embarrassed. 9 hours on the road because they trusted a website. Harper stood up. "Let's take a ride." We drove out to my place in his state truck, tires humming on the pavement. I'd already grabbed my deed, survey map, and the original plat description from the courthouse. Bearings and distances, not creeks and guesswork. When we pulled through my gate, the laminated ridgeline sign was still there, bright and smug against my fence post. Harper got out, adjusted his hat, and walked straight to it. He took photos from 3 angles, then stepped back and scanned the tree line. "Show me your corner pins," he said. So we walked. We walked the north boundary first. Purple paint clear as day on oak trunks every 20 yards. Harper carried a GPS unit and stopped at each iron pin, marking coordinates. He didn't rush, didn't assume. He measured. About halfway down the east line we hit the creek bend, the spot Travis had apparently decided was a convenient natural divider. The water shimmered in the morning light, shallow and slow. Harper looked at the survey in his hand. "Your legal description doesn't mention the creek at all," he said. "No, sir. It calls for north 32 degrees east, 380 feet from the southeast corner pin. That puts the entire creek on your side. That's what I've always known." He crouched and brushed leaves aside until he found the iron rod embedded in concrete, just where the survey said it would be. He tapped it with his boot. "Well, that's not ambiguous." We finished the loop. Every ridgeline tag nailed inside my boundary got photographed. Harper wrote notes in a small pad, calm as a man filling out a grocery list. When we got back to the truck, he looked at me. "How many clients have you seen?" "Just 2 yesterday." He nodded. "You mind if I swing by your neighbor's place next?" I didn't mind at all. We drove the half-mile east. Travis's metal shop door was open, and I could see a side-by-side parked inside, along with a stack of corn feeders. He came out when he saw the state truck, wiping his hands on a rag. "Morning, officer," he called. Then he saw me step out of the passenger side. His smile shifted. "Not gone, just tighter." "Everything all right?" he asked. Harper didn't waste time. "We're looking into a complaint regarding commercial hunting access on adjacent property." Travis glanced at me. I didn't say a word. "What complaint?" he asked. Harper held up the contract. "This one." Travis's jaw flexed. "That's my client agreement." "For which parcel?" Harper asked. "My property and associated acreage, Travis said carefully. Associated how? Travis hesitated just long enough to tell the truth without meaning to. The creek's been the understood boundary for years. Understood by who? I finally said. He shot me a look, irritation creeping in. Come on, Matt, he said. Everybody around here always treated the water as the line. No, Travis. The survey treats bearings and distances as the line. Harper's voice stayed level. Do you have written permission from Mr. Carter to lease his acreage? Travis exhaled through his nose. We had a conversation a couple years back about maybe partnering up. A conversation is an authorization. Harper's tone didn't change, but it hardened a notch. You advertise expanded acreage this season? He asked. Travis shifted his weight. We updated the website, yeah. Did you collect payment for access that included the creek bottom? Silence stretched. I could hear a wind chime on his porch clinking soft in the breeze. Yes, he said finally. Harper nodded once, like a man confirming a fact he already knew. I'll be issuing citations for unlawful commercialization of hunting rights and facilitation of trespass. Each contracted hunter accessing property outside your deeded parcel constitutes a separate violation. Travis's face went pale under his tan. That's excessive, he said. This is a civil boundary dispute at worst. Harper looked at him evenly. Selling wildlife access you don't control is not a civil oversight. It's regulated. Travis looked at me then, anger replacing color. You called him before talking to me. I held his gaze. You nailed your business logo to my fence. He didn't answer that. The citations came 2 days later in the mail. I got a copy because I was the reporting landowner. 3 contracted clients that weekend alone. 3 violations for commercialization. 3 for trespass facilitation. The fine stacked fast. But the real hit wasn't the money. His outfitter permit was suspended pending review. In Missouri, without that permit, you're not guiding anyone during peak season. No clients. No deposits. No income. Word travels quick in a rural county. By Tuesday afternoon, folks at the feed store were already talking. You hear about Travis? Somebody asked as I loaded mineral blocks into my truck. Heard he overstepped. That's one way to put it. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something settle in my chest. Not joy exactly. More like balance. Wednesday evening, just before sunset, I heard tires on gravel and looked out my kitchen window. Travis's truck rolled up slow. He sat there for a moment before getting out. No hat this time. Just a flannel shirt and a face that looked 5 years older than it had the week before. I stepped onto the porch before he could knock. He didn't start with anger. He started with exhaustion. Matt, he said quietly, I screwed up. I didn't invite him in. We stood there on the porch, golden light cutting across the yard. You relied on an old map? I asked. He nodded. The realtor packet from when I bought my place showed the creek as a boundary line. I figured it was common understanding. Common understanding doesn't override recorded surveys. He swallowed. I had clients lined up all season. I expanded because I needed the revenue. Feed costs are up. Insurance is up. I thought he trailed off. You thought I wouldn't notice? Or wouldn't fight it? His jaw tightened. I thought you didn't use half of it anyway. There it was. The truth underneath the paperwork. In his mind, unused land was wasted land. And wasted land was fair game for monetizing. It's not inventory, Travis, I said. It's family ground. He looked down at the porch boards. I can refund the clients, he said. Pull the listings down. Just, can we keep this from getting worse? I thought about my granddad again. About my niece casting a line into that creek. About those 2 hunters who drove 9 hours trusting a man who sold them something he didn't own. It was already worse. It was already worse, and we both knew it. We stood there on my porch with the light fading out of the sky, that kind of Missouri sunset that turns everything gold for about 3 minutes and then drops you straight into blue shadow. Travis looked like a man trying to calculate the cost of a decision he'd already made. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to take down every single ridgeline sign that sits inside my boundary. Tonight, you're going to contact every client who booked access that included my creek bottom and refund them in full. And you're going to put in writing that my property is excluded from your operation. Permanently. He ran a hand through his hair. That's going to bury me this season. I held his eyes. You buried yourself when you started selling something that wasn't yours. There was a long pause. Wind moved through the sycamores down by the water, a soft rustle that felt louder than it was. You really couldn't have just come to me first? He asked, a little edge creeping back in. I gave him a small, tired smile. You really couldn't have asked before you printed contracts? That landed. He didn't have a response for it. The truth is, Travis and I had history that went deeper than deer season. When he first moved in, I helped him pull a truck out of the mud after a spring flood. I lent him a post-hole digger one summer. We'd shared beers at the county fair. But over the years, I'd watched something change in him. Or maybe it had always been there. He was ambitious in a way I never felt the need to be. Always scaling up. Bigger feeders. Better blinds. A slicker website. He talked about branding the way my dad talked about rainfall. And somewhere along the line, I think my quiet 76 acres started looking like a missed opportunity to him. Unused space. Untapped revenue. And maybe, if I'm honest, part of me resented that mindset. The idea that if land isn't generating income, it's somehow failing. My land had generated plenty, just not money. It had given my dad a place to breathe after factory shifts. It had given me silence when my marriage fell apart 5 years back. It had given my niece a first bluegill and my best friend a place to scatter his father's ashes. But that kind of value doesn't fit on a spreadsheet. Travis shifted on the porch. If I do all that, he said, will you stay out of the permit review? That question told me everything. I don't control the review, I said. That's the state. But I'm not looking to add fuel. I just want my boundary respected. He nodded slowly. I'll get the signs down. He walked back to his truck looking smaller somehow. Not defeated exactly, just recalibrating. That night, as promised, I watched from my kitchen window while headlights moved along the tree line. He and one of his buddies pulled the laminated ridgeline tags off my fence posts. I could see the silhouette of him prying one loose with a claw hammer. There's something strange about watching someone undo their own overreach. By the weekend, his website had changed. The acreage listed was smaller. Accurate. No more mention of exclusive creek frontage. A few days later, my attorney, Linda Morales out of Springfield, sent him a formal notice. Nothing dramatic. Just clean language establishing that my parcel was excluded from any commercial leasing and that future encroachment would trigger immediate civil action. Paper has a way of making things real. Winter settled in quiet after that. The woods went back to sounding like they always had in December, dry leaves skittering across frozen ground, the creek running thin and clear. I replaced my old entrance sign with a metal one bolted to a treated post. Private property. No commercial leasing. Violators prosecuted. It wasn't about being unfriendly. It was about being unmistakable. A month later, I ran into Travis at the feed store. First time since the porch. He looked tired, but steadier. Permits reinstated on probation, he said before I could ask. Lost most of the season, though. I nodded. He studied me for a second. You think I'm a crook? It wasn't the question I expected. I think you convinced yourself it wasn't a big deal, I said. That's worse in some ways. He let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. Yeah, maybe. We stood there between stacks of seed bags like two men who'd both learned something neither of us had planned on learning. You ever think about leasing a small section legit? He asked, almost careful now. Partnership. Written. Clean. I considered it for a second, not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to understand why I didn't. Maybe someday, I said. But it'll be my idea if it happens. He nodded, accepting that. Driving home that afternoon, I found myself replaying everything. Not just the contracts and the citations, but the subtle shifts before it. The comments about opportunity. The way he'd looked at my woods like empty shelf space. There's a tension in rural communities that nobody likes to name. Some folks see land as heritage. Others see it as leverage. Neither is entirely wrong. But when you stop asking permission and start assuming access, that's when things break. I don't hate Travis. I don't even think he started out intending to steal. I think he told himself a story where the creek was close enough to a boundary to count, where I wasn't using that stretch anyway, where expansion was just smart business. And once money started coming in, that story probably felt easier to believe. But here's the thing about lines on a survey. They look thin on paper. Barely there. On the ground, they mean everything. They decide who pays the taxes, who carries the liability, who has the right to say yes or no. And if the game warden hadn't shown up when he did, if I'd chosen pride over process and stormed down there that first day, maybe this story ends with shouting across a fence line, maybe worse. Out here, disputes over land have a way of escalating fast. Instead, it ended with paperwork and a fine. And a lesson. Sometimes I walk that east boundary just to remind myself how close it all was. The iron pin at the corner is still there, solid in the dirt. The purple paint is fresh again this spring. The creek still bends exactly where it always has, not caring who argues over it. Travis still runs ridgeline. Smaller footprint. Tighter language. I've seen trucks at his place this season, but none behind my gate. We nod when we pass now. Not warm. Not hostile. Just aware. And every once in a while I wonder what you would have done if you came home and found strangers hunting your family's ground with contracts in their pockets and your neighbor's signature at the bottom. Would you have handled it the same way? Would you have knocked on his door first? Or called the law? Was it justice or was it overkill? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you draw the line between neighborly grace and standing your ground. And if you've ever dealt with boundary disputes, hunting leases, or a situation where someone treated your property like opportunity instead of ownership, share it below. Out here, lines matter. The question is, how far would you go to defend yours?